Okay, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the root cause and also root cause analysis, particularly the meaning of the root cause. And I'm very excited about this topic. I mean, hopefully you will see the energy that come up from me. Okay, so some of the background information. This was originally presented about 10 years ago. And I have been keep updating with new information and using that throughout, basically. Okay, so one thing I want to address, why that I want to talk about this, or I have a passion about this topic. As you can see, over years, I did publish a bunch of serious discussions over this. And also, very frequently, different organizations, they will ask me to go talk about this, and some of the recording are listed over there as well. So again, why I have a passion on this topic. Hopefully, you notice in your work environment, you run into those questions, regularly as well. So this is something I hear very frequently. That is, have you found the root cause yet? To me, it seems like it's a perpetual debate. It's never settled. And no matter how you do and whatever you do, you always run into kind of this type of discussions or debate. So that's kind of make me part of the reason that make me energized to this. Okay, so the other part is what I like to cover. Essentially, this is the list that I'm showing on the screen that I like to go through. It's break into roughly two segments. The first is what's the true meaning of root cause? And then followed by that is what's the point of doing root cause analysis? And then a little bit like technical side then. The first, those are more of the philosophical kind of discussions, but I feel like those are the foundations of all of the remaining activities, those techniques and so forth. So basically the second segment, we can cover a little bit about the techniques, both for generic root cause analysis and also for specifically troubleshooting. And in the same time, I feel like the first segment, the philosophical discussion, to me, it's much more important and much more interesting. And because that actually will point people to different directions when they are really doing root cause analysis. So this is what I plan to do. And this one, it can be done in roughly like 2 hours from presentation perspective. And the first segment using about 1 hour and techniques using another hour. And also the same material can be used for day-long workshop as well. Essentially, the remaining time is to spend on actual practice on cases and to really do root cause analysis. Okay, so that's kind of what I plan to cover. And then a little bit background information about me. I will just show everything. Hopefully, it's kind of folks can see that I've been in this field primarily in Lean Six Sigma for quite a long time, starting in 1998. And then certainly root cause analysis is part of this overall, under the Lean Six Sigma effort. And one thing I'm very proud of is I get the opportunity to meet with Jack Welch and get his personal blessing, for whatever I've been doing in my program. So overall, so that's my background. Now, the very first kind of thing I like to spend time on, that is the true meaning of root cause. And then I will start from this quote. The beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. And it's attributed to Socrates, but it may be, other people's, statement as well, right? The reason I want to bring this up is, as I mentioned earlier, I noticed with the discussion we have about the true meaning of root cause, it will change people's perspective in root cause analysis. So I feel like it's much more interesting and much more useful to spend time on. And personally, I feel like the first segment is a lot more interesting overall to talk about. The second segment about techniques, you will see a lot of similarity between different people's offering, and that'll be really not very unique. But the first segment, I can claim that is quite unique, that not many people, they are willing to look at root cause, the meaning, and also what's the point of doing root cause analysis from this angle. So anyway, so let's go ahead. The definition of root cause. By the way, I don't see people, people seems like are not showing up on the camera on the screen. And it's much better for this segment to be interactive, right? To have discussions or debate. That'll be more interesting. So I'm eager to hear some of the folks from the audience, if you can share your perspective in terms of how do you like to define root cause? How do you describe root cause in a way? And again, the reason I want to try this is I just noticed over years, root cause, the concept, it seems like something that everyone is familiar with, but to really put out a statement that's acceptable by other people or by acceptable broadly, it will not be very straightforward. And I just want to give it a try. Will someone is willing to give out your version of that, of the description about the root cause? That will make it more interesting again, right? So if you are willing to try, maybe you unmute and okay. There will be
Can unmute yourself or put it in chat to answer his question.
Oh, sure. Yeah, if you want to put in chat, that'll be fine too. What I'm trying to highlight is there will be no wrong answer. And in the same time, again, it would be not very straightforward to have a statement that would be broadly accepted. And specifically, I'm looking for a particular ingredient or property associated to the root cause. And most of the time, people will not mention that in their definition, quote unquote, or statement. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Duke. By the way, Duke probably is the true expert in root cause analysis. He got special books on that, right, in the subject. And in my case, I mean, I really appreciate, Duke, that you interact on this. Okay, so the chat he put out is the lowest level at which action can be taken to prevent the recurrence of the problem. So that's a pretty good definition or statement on this kind of term, right? Or on this concept. Anyone else want to give it a try? No matter if you spelled it out, I think that exercise to think about will be very beneficial. Oh, okay. So now he's adding more. Maybe you should think about cost and feasibility and so forth. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I mean, hopefully this process get you thinking. So here are some of the in public domain, some of the version of the definition. So this is what I grabbed from Wikipedia in 2006. It's a little bit longer version. And I highlighted several keywords. For example, initiating, causal chain, intervention, and also I like this part that is lack of widely accepted definition, which I feel it's true. It is the case. Okay, thanks, Danny, for putting out your version. The true reason that caused the failure. Okay, yeah. So all of those are good. In the same time, I'm looking for some particular property. Usually people will not mention. Okay, so that's one version I showed. Another newer version. That's what when I did that for Phoenix finished section, I extract some newer version. So this is what Collins dictionary kind of short statement. The fundamental reason for the occurrence of a problem. So that it's similar to what Duke put it out, right? So those are two versions. A little bit more. This is the current version of Wikipedia. They condensed it because a lot of people are working on this, right? And one of the key thing worth highlighting is the direct cost that is being used, that word. And also SQ version, the current version. And it did mention the core issue and the highest level cost, and which I will assume it's equivalent to the lowest level cost as well, right? It depends on like what direction we're looking at. And by the way, please feel free to interact. That'll be more interesting than just me talking. Okay, so that's several version we can see kind of from year and also variation. Personally, I feel like the newer definition, newer version are not as satisfying. Personally, I feel like the first one is actually better. And here's why. Okay. So I'm trying to highlight several things. One is it's very interesting that at least when I put out my initial publication and discussion. By the way, one of the reason that I decided to dive into this like years ago is because I've been doing those Lean Six Sigma training and just following the regular practice of introducing root cause analysis, and it'll be similar to what I noticed. That is, there are a lot of publications or training that focus on the techniques of doing root cause analysis. In the same time, at that time, at least, it's true. Now, maybe there are a little bit more. That is, you rarely hear people put out the statement or definition about what is root cause. And considering the earlier definition that you mentioned, maybe part of the reason is it's hard to get something commonly acceptable, widely acceptable and so forth. So it's a very interesting observation that you see a lot of kind of places and materials introduce techniques, method and tools about root cause analysis, but rarely people talk about what is root cause. And to me, that is quite awkward. And in the same time, in my training, I notice people struggle to decide where to stop. So I have to figure out certain way to get people kind of establish the mentality to get a sense on where to stop. And another thing I notice is after people have done this a couple of times, they already developed their own version, their own sense. But for beginners, they typically they will struggle in terms of deciding when to stop. Okay, so that is kind of part of this. And then more discussion, that is, when you try to define or think about root cause, are you thinking about that root cause is something, it's already there and kind of a true root cause? And it just, the problem is it's just being buried somewhere, covered by something else. And then the root cause analysis, the task of root cause analysis is to really try to discover that something already defined there. So that's kind of, seems like my feeling is most people, they are kind of in that mentality. They're looking for something already predefined, and they just need to identify which one it is. So that's one. Another thing, hopefully folks can think about this, right? And that is, think about this, the entitlement aspect. And that's what I'm looking for, actually, in all of the definitions. If I give out two scenarios, like for the heir of the king, right, of the kingdom, what kind of rules it'll be? Is that the oldest son will be the next king, or is any of the sons can be the next king? Which way will apply to the root cause analysis? Feel free to interact, either unmute or in the chat. You see, if you look into it, the first scenario, there is an entitlement component in there. It's exclusive. It's only the oldest son can be the king. Only one person, predefined, come from born into. Versus the second one is a choice that any of the many sons, they all can be the king. So there is no entitlement. It's a selection. What I'm trying to highlight is, yeah, so that's the thing, the kind of some of the sound I'm trying to highlight. That is, with my understanding, with my digging into this, I feel like there's no true, quote unquote, true or absolute root cause. The so-called root cause is really something, is a chosen. It's something subjectively chosen to serve that role. So in a way, it's a moving target. It's like the second scenario of the heir of the kingdom. And so something associated that is, as part of this, there's no true initiator, and it's something is chosen to be. It's not born into. And the importance of this is this will change our perspective when we do root cause analysis, essentially. Okay, so again, I'm trying to highlight, with my understanding, the root cause, it's something is chosen to be. It's not something born into. There's no entitlement. So now we probably can understand why we have this perpetual kind of debate. And somebody just insist like A should be the root cause. Somebody else will insist B should be. And just maybe in their mind, they think the A is the oldest son, B is the oldest son, or whatever. But the reality is they can all be. I mean, it's not like A or B, they are entitled to, they are chosen to be. That's what I try to highlight. Okay, a little bit more elaboration. Personally, again, I feel like this segment will be more interesting in in this discussion and exercising our brain. Okay, so one example I adopted, cited from this book, and essentially you see pretty straightforward 5I. Get injured because of fall, because of wet floor, because of leaking valve, because of the seal failure, and then because of poor maintenance. So it's a very typical 5Y root cause analysis. One question is this poor maintenance the end of the world? It looks like if it stopped here, poor maintenance will be the root cause. But if there's something else underneath after poor maintenance that can be the cause of this poor maintenance, or this is the end or the initiator of the problem, think about it.
Maybe lack of training.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris, that you're interacting. Your voice is a little bit low, but I heard. Yeah, I mean, I assume you're saying you can keep going, right? The message is indeed you can keep going. There's no physical or theoretical ending. You can always dig something in. So that comes to the nature of cause-effect relationship that I'm trying to highlight here. The cause-effect relationship, it should follow the law of nature or physics. And then also, I don't know how many people notice, it's a chain. And also that chain is infinite. And there's no ending until you say the God made it so. You can always find something before that or leading into that. That's why any item, it will always be a cause and effect at the same time. So we constantly hear people argue if A is the cause or B is the cause. I mean, the reality is they both are cause and effect, depend on what you're talking about. They're relative, right? They are the cause of its downstream and the effect of its upstream. So the same item, it always have two heads, dual role. That's just the nature of the chain of the causation, essentially. And infinite. Okay, so this infinite chain of causation, it's widely recognized in the philosophical world, actually. And a lot of those, it may not be widely recognized in the engineering world. So that's something maybe worse for us. Most of us quality profession may fall under the engineering like people to think about, right? And for those infinite chain of causation. So that's one thing. Another thing I have to add, I mentioned I over years I have to continuously enhance the presentation because people debate and they feed it back to my previous presentation or article, whatever, and argue that if we only talk about chain of causation, that may be oversimplification of the reality. So we have to mention in reality, it will be more like a network of causation. And the network of causation, there are certain techniques can help us study the network, but certainly it's more complex. So our remaining discussion will focus on the chain of causation, even though the reality is many chains coexist and form the network, which makes the discussion a lot more indirect, complicated. Anyway, okay. So that's the first segment about the true meaning of root cause. And if I quickly to recap, I want to highlight there's no really true root cause. The root cause is what's chosen to be, not an entitlement. If we have that in mind, we probably can rethink about what's the point of doing root cause analysis. Okay, so here is another example I adopted from this article. That is, if you look at the typical problem, as we discussed earlier, it always have a cost and always have an effect. And the typical kind of the direction that people are given, that is, you want to always shift your attention to the cost side. And because that will help you kind of derive solutions, better solutions. And I want to have a little bit discussion about that. Why we have this kind of direction to go, always shift attention to the cost. In the same time, we should keep in mind it's a chain of causation infinity, right? So once you shift to the cost will become the new problem and itself has its own cost. So that would be another no-ending shift if you really want to do. So I want to have a little more discussion on what's the point of doing root cause analysis and why we are shifting attention to the cost side. One thing is, and this probably, maybe many people probably have seen this. Let's just use that as an example.
Papa, can we play outside?
No,
Why?
because it's 5 o'clock in the morning. It's too early.
Why?
The sun hasn't come up yet.
Why?
Because the sun comes up later.
Why?
Well, the Earth goes around, and when it turns a certain amount, the sun shows on the horizon. There's no real jobs in America
So
anymore.
I will jump, right?
We had good jobs for a while, but it's just we were lucky, and now we're unlucky.
Why?
It's just the way it goes.
Why?
Because God's dead and we're alone.
Okay.
Okay, so this is kind of one of the thing, right? That when we talk about doing root cause analysis and doing like 5 why, and essentially we're saying keep asking why, and there's always something leading to this, right? So I just want to have this discussion to think about what's behind this, right? Why they want us to keep digging to the next level of cost. And again, at least for newcomers, they always struggle with where to stop. And as illustrated in that clip, typically 2 scenarios that people will stop. One, they just choose to stop. Okay, I will stop. I will accept what you said. Or you said, the God made it so. there will be no more argument. Okay, so what's the value to keep digging into the cost side? And again, I noticed maybe it's not as straightforward to interact. Please feel free to interact. Either unmute, share your or put it in the chat. You see,
Define
it's typically.
depth.
Thank you much again, Chris, for interacting. Okay, so what's behind that is typically because the cost of the cost typically have bigger impact. If you address the cost side, your impact will be bigger. And this is essentially the driver of the general direction people are saying you should always shift attention to the cost because the solution at that level will have bigger impact, which is true. One thing I notice many people don't think about or overlook, and I think that's something it'll add value to. That's the next. That is, I don't know how many people notice, along with you going deeper to your upstream cost, your cost for doing that will also go up and will always go up. So it's not like a cost free. And it's not like you can keep going with no consequence. And that, a lot of time, will really define that you couldn't go. It's just because you cannot afford to keep going. That's one thing I noticed, but I just don't know how many people are thinking in that area. Okay, so let's use Jefferson Memorial, another widely known example, to make the point
Hey,
of.
Gary, can I step in just real quick?
Go ahead. Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah.
So the way I think of it as what is the lowest cost with the best outcome of not repeating the defect?
So you are talking about more of the techniques, right? Like what's kind of make you decide. So one thing, very good. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, indeed, there are kind of tricks or things people can think about. So not repeating is what Chris highlighting is a good thing that people leverage. So after this, we're going to touch on several things as well. That is based on my experience, what helped to decide where to stop. And I just feel like after we clarify what's the point of doing root cause analysis, those will become a lot more clear. Okay, yeah. So thanks again, Chris, for sharing kind of those tips, right, and tricks. Okay. So with that, let's take a look at the Jefferson Memorial example. Many people probably are familiar with this.
Years ago, the stone exterior was deteriorating at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., a popular monument in the United States. Repairing the stone or painting over the worn areas was too expensive. So park rangers turned to root cause analysis and started asking why.
Why was the stone deteriorating?
High-powered sprayers were being used to wash the memorial every 2 weeks.
Why were high-powered washings needed every 2 weeks?
Because of bird droppings.
Asking why stopped because it seemed the cause was found. Workers put nets around the building, but they were unsightly, and the birds found ways around them. So it was back to the drawing board, or the 5 whys.
Why are there so many birds?
They come to feed on spiders.
Why are there so many spiders?
They feed on insects at night.
Why are there so many insects?
They're attracted by lights that shine on the memorial at night.
With a new cause found, questions stopped, and a plan was created to reduce the amount of time the memorial spent in the spotlight at night, and it worked. The insects were reduced by 90%, and with the root cause removed, the excessive cleaning was no longer needed. An unexpected benefit was a cost savings realized by using less electricity.
Okay, yeah, so that's the story we're going to leverage, right? I mean, we can get various points out of a particular example. Okay, so our focus will be this, to answer those 3 questions. First, is the true root cause found in this case? Second, is the solution of essentially turning on the light later, right? Push out the lighting at a later time. Is that the only choice or only solution. The third, if the solution is a good one. Okay, so please interact and thanks Chris and other folks, right? What's your take based on this example and
It seems to be
in
the
those
cheaper-
3 areas? Other folks as well, right? Please.
It seems to be the cheaper choice of the best outcome.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, I guess you nailed it, right? You get the key message here. So I will assume the answer to those questions is probably that lightning time isn't the true root cause. Hopefully we will all agree, right? And also the solution of pushing out the lightning to the later time is not the only solution. But in the same time, we probably will all agree it is a good solution because it costs low. It's a low cost solution and good result. So hopefully we are all agreed on this using this example. So that's the point I'm trying to make. And that lead to the key message I have about what's the point of doing root cause analysis. At least this is my view, right? I mentioned it again. This first segment, it'll be a little bit unique. And not many people think from the angle that I'm thinking, but I think it's more practical to help people decide, for example, where to stop and so forth. Okay, so again, the key over here is to find the leverage point that give you this. The ROI, return on investment, probably is the key message here. It's not about the true root cause, at least in that case. But the solution, the chosen solution, it does have a high return on investment, high impact, and a low cost. That is what, based on my observation, people is actually doing, maybe subconsciously. So many people, they didn't realize behind their mind, they are calculating the ROI, return on investment. And if they see good return, they will go for it. If they don't, they will not. So that's the one key thing I want to highlight. In the same time, I want to highlight also that is if you look at most of the training or whatever, right, that ROI mentality usually isn't touched in most of the root cause analysis doctrine in a way. I mean, people mostly focus on the first side, the impact. All of the most of the discussion on root cause analysis, they focus on the impact. Rarely they touch on the cost. But in business decision, the cost is always there. So in many cases, maybe it's unnoticed, but people are doing the ROI calculation, assessment in that case. So that's why I want to elaborate. To me, at least one key aspect of root cause analysis is really looking for the leverage point that can give you high return on investment, high ROI. So think about what Chris has mentioned, right? So Chris mentioned where to stop. His tip is if it doesn't repeat, it'll be a good place to stop. It's again, that falls under this high ROI scenario. So that's what I'm trying to highlight. Okay, more can be talked about. A lot more can be talked about if we're looking at the ROI aspect in the root cause analysis. One thing, we're looking for low cost solution. That's one thing. That's why that's how you get high ROI, right? In the same time, the deeper you go, the higher at least the research cost will be. The research cost will always keep going higher. So the trick is you are looking for much lower implementation cost that can bring down your overall solution cost. What I notice is if people can see that, can foresee it in their analysis, they will keep chasing. they will keep going. If they no longer see that potential, typically people will choose to stop there, essentially. This is how I noticed. And it's certainly there are a lot can be talked about. For example, the way to calculate ROI, return on investment, it can be short-term based, long-term based. Overall, I noticed everyone is doing their own calculation behind the scene. And that may be part of the reason we have this perpetual argument on, and the management saying, have you find the root cause? Is this the root cause? The other, engineer may say, this is, that one is not, and so forth. That's why we have that continuous argument over which one should be the root cause. Because part of the reason, everyone is doing their own calculation. It's not known by others. And so personally, I really like to bring this ROI calculation to be on the table instead of under the table, essentially. And so that we make conscious assessment on ROI. And that will make it more visible by everyone, easily to align people to get agreement. So if we all see the ROI the same way, we will less likely to have that argument, to argue which one should be the root cause. That's one thing. Another thing is ROI will change over time as well. And there is a balance act as well, because there are so many different stakeholders, so many different parties. We need to consider their interests and so forth. Okay, so that's about ROI. Any comments or questions before we move to the next? Okay, so with that, hopefully we can feel, if we look at things in this angle, the perspective of doing ROI, doing root cause analysis will change a little bit. Now, really, a lot of tension is on which one give us better return on investment, essentially. Not necessarily chasing the true root cause. And personally, I mean, there are probably other tips and techniques, right? Personally, I feel like those three things will benefit a lot. Us to look for the leveraging point for high ROI. So one is Pareto principle, 80-20 rule. Another is desirability matrix. And the other one is span of control, sphere of influence. So I'm pretty sure there are other ways people can leverage to look for the leverage point. So first, Pareto, everyone knows, right? Everyone is familiar with that. Behind that, it needs data to support those calculations. But overall, the mentality is 20% of the thing impact you the 80%. So that will itself is a leverage point. So that's one thing everyone knows. The next one, the desirability matrix, is the one I feel like we can bring the ROI analysis or assessment to kind of be open assessment so that everyone can align to, essentially. Instead of doing subconscious ROI assessment individually, this desirability matrix can align people and make it explicit analysis, essentially. So the two dimensions, right, for the desirability. One side is the impact side, exactly. The other side is the cost side. Or it could be difficulty, it could be effort, and so forth. And essentially, okay, I touched the wrong button. Okay, and essentially, we want low cost, high impact, and that's the higher leverage, essentially, right? We want that direction. And one thing I want to highlight again, mention again, it's very interesting to notice this. That is, the ROI is so important in business decision. But if you look at all of the most of the analysis, or so, you'll notice that ROI is missing in those two activities. One is root cause analysis. Another is FMEA. None of the standard practice have the place for people to think about ROI. I personally feel like it's a deficiency. It's a a weakness of the established practice. And that's why I like this desirability matrix a lot. That is to make it more explicit, make the ROI consideration more explicit to align people. Comments? Questions? Okay. So the next one is about span of control, sphere of influence. And hopefully this is straightforward as well, right? And for things they can always be in 3 tiers of influence. At the core, at the center, we have almost full control, much higher impact or influence. And then there's an outer space that we have some influence. And then there's a beyond outer space that we have no influence. So basically, this represents the cost side. Essentially, within your control, you can get lower cost and a higher ROI in a way. And in the sphere of influence, you can get some ROI. But for the outer space, out of your control, you get no return in a way. So this is one way to help us identify where the leverage point. So the control associated to that, right? The 3 tier. And one thing maybe worth noting is those envelope, those boundaries can be changed. So if there are something falls at the outside, certainly one kind of option is to try to push the boundary to gain influence and then some ROI, return investment that way. Okay. So any comments, questions? Wonderful. So with that, maybe a little bit more elaboration against the span of control, sphere of influence. Sometimes it can mean like sword has 2 edges, right? Sometimes it helps us to improve or identify the leverage point for a high ROI, and sometimes it can be a self-imposed constraint as well. Essentially like this, right? And sometimes people may conclude it's outside of my influence. We are not going to pursue. And in that case, we can, as one possible scenario, lost the opportunity, lost a certain opportunity as well. So I just want to mention that one as well. So watch out for the self-imposed constraint. Okay. So with that, we probably can take a look at another example. London cholera breakout.
In 1854, cholera struck the city of London. Over 600 people died in just a few weeks. People thought that when there were terrible outbreaks of disease, especially cholera, that it was caused by poisonous air. But John Snow, the physician in London, was convinced that cholera in particular was a waterborne disease.
He was an icon of epidemiology. Yeah. He was against the flow of the times. What was very interesting about John Snow was the deductive reasoning. He was very much a scientist, and he believed in measurement.
As the father of epidemiology, he got on his feet, walked around, and started asking, where are these illnesses occurring? So he could see patterns. Epidemiologists essentially look for patterns of disease and then make a prediction of the causes or origins of the outbreak.
And right here was the Broad Street pump. And it turned out that most of the people who had fallen ill and who were continuing to fall ill had drunk water from this particular pump. John Snow is often credited with ending the 1854 epidemic by removing the handle from the contaminated Broad Street pump. The full story is much more interesting.
Okay, so that's the story we're going to leverage to reinforce the point. Hopefully, I already made it a point, but I just want to use this example to reinforce that. Okay, same 3 questions to answer, right? Has he, John Snow, identified the true root cause? If this is the only solution to remove the handle of the pump, if this is a good solution, somebody want to share, want to jump in, share your thought? has he reached identified the true root cause? Is the pump or the handle of the pump the actual root cause of this cholera breakout?
No, obviously not.
Thank you much. Right. So that's why I just want to use this to make the point. Then is removing the handle the only choice he can have?
No.
Thank you much. In the same
No,
time,
we could drop it.
yeah. In the same time, do you agree if removing the handle a very good choice as a solution?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you much. Yeah. So with that, let's okay. I noticed there are new things coming in the chat that maybe I didn't scroll to see. Okay, wonderful. So with that, a little bit more elaboration on this, right? And as you can see, definitely he is nowhere near to the quote unquote true root cause, because cholera was identified a decade later by an Italian scientist, totally different person, a decade after. So he has nowhere near to the true root cause for the cholera itself. And he did examine the water under the microscope and saw things moving around and speculate something wrong. That's as far as I get. And then, if the cholera itself is the root cause, probably know as well, there are a lot of studies about this. The same type of breakout, it happens almost every year. And it just happened to be that year is a little bit dramatic. And John Snow is able to identify and leverage and to stop it quickly. So it just repeated happen. And people in general consider it's the poor, the economy, essentially. That's the area poor people live in. No sewage and stuff. And the well water mixed with the sewage and get contaminated and so forth. So it's really the poor living condition is a deeper level root cause. So the message again, right? It's not about the true root cause, but in the same time, it's a great way to solve that particular breakout. And I like the story a lot is because the leverage, the handle itself, very visual, that's the leverage point and physical. And this is the memorial, and behind that is a pub called the John Snow pub, serve as a memorial as well. A little museum at the second floor as well. So this is my Mecca. Every time I go to London, I always want to go over there and have a pint of beer in that pub, just to think about the history and so forth. So anyway, so I just want to use this to reinforce my message, essentially.
So we have a question. In today's thinking, did John Snow take a correction to stop the issue?
Indeed. I mean, it's for that breakout, it's effective, but he really didn't resolve it. And the breakout came back again the following year, right? So it's really over years when the living condition get improved, and it will stop having that breakout and that type of thing. So there are a lot of research on this because it's a modern epidemiology, right? And people can use the link. There are multiple places. Okay, I want to this conclude essentially my first kind of segment. And looking at the time, I think it's a good timing. And I probably should browse through the chat since I didn't scroll down to monitor the newer interests, just in case anything I should answer. And folks, feel free to unmute and weigh in with any clarifications, debate, argument, or whatever follow-up point and so forth, right? Okay, so thanks for folks like Joe mentioned the no true root cause and okay, containment action and so forth. Yeah, indeed. So in the next part, maybe we will talk a little bit about what's the, how do we differentiate between containment and the preventive action and corrective action and so forth, right? And sometimes it may be a little bit more obvious. Sometimes the same thing may be a dual role. It may be overlapping and in the same action. some people may consider it as a containment, some people may consider it as corrective, and so forth. So indeed, it may not have that clear line as well. Okay, wonderful. So I'm trying to browse through just to make sure I'm not missing any of the key point, right? Okay. Okay, wonderful.
Gary?
There is a question from John Barrett, right? In today's thinking, did Jon Snow take a correction to stop the issue? Okay, so anyone want to weigh in to the last item in the chat? John Barrett has this comment, right? Do we consider it's a corrective action? Is a containment, or and it's again the next the right after this the next segment we may touch on that a little bit. Personally, I feel like sometimes we may not have a clear cut between the two type, right? And the same action it may fall into both and depend on what's our scope and what's our expectation and so forth. So it's debatable. I agree, it's debatable. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Well, if it's containment, it'll be taking the pump off and capping the well. That'll be considered containment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it may not. That's what I noticed. One thing.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
anyone else?
Well, containment usually applies to the problem itself, which is the cholera. So, it's where do you put a dividing line between dealing with the problem versus dealing with the causes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So maybe one angle also is to look at what's our goal of the solution, right? What's our intended scope of the solution? If we only look at that particular breakout, I think that's all he need to do. Essentially, stop people from using that well and very effectively stop the breakout. But if we are looking at preventing the breakout from coming back, then that's like multiple decades of effort. As I mentioned, that breakout happened every year, almost. Just the magnitude that year, this 1854, is a little bit dramatic. But every year, they always have a little bit more or less. And it took them, by the way, this place is the Soho area. Right now, it's the center of London, right, very close to Chinatown. And right now, it's the most expensive place. But at that time, it's the swamp, essentially. It's the poor people living there. And they don't even have the storage system in that case. That caused that contamination. So really, it's after many decades, things get changed fundamentally, and breakout no longer happen. Okay. John Simmons want to raise the hand, want to say things, looks like, right? Feel free.
Yeah, I think that we might have already discussed it. This is John. But you look at it and, he kind of looked at is not, and the people that were dying had drank water from that pump. So in a sense, it was, his way of looking at it would have been a cause. And that, and so he did take corrective action by taking that handle off, I'd say,
Yeah. So depend on the scope, right? If the scope is to stop that breakout, that we can consider that's a corrective action. But if the scope is to say stop breakout from happening, and that's after he died, it's still happening. So okay. Anyway. Wonderful discussion. Thanks, folks, for weighing in. And with that, I think we can probably wrap up the very first segment. If I can recap on what the message, the key message, right? That I want. And again, personally, I feel like the first segment is more interesting, more worthy to have discussions compared to second segment, which are like techniques, a little bit boring to me. So anyway, yeah. So the very first. The cause-effect relationship should really go by the law of physics or the law of nature, essentially. And we need to go by that instead of just think about by ourselves, right? You need to follow certain rules or things. That's one. Another key message is root cause is not a born to be, not a entitlement, is a chosen and very subjective in a way. And that's why we end up with having debate all the time. Because different people, they have different perspective to choose different one, essentially. And there's no absolute objective way to really, for sure, one is the entitled root cause. Okay. And another thing is, I personally feel like root cause analysis is really about identifying return on investment, the leverage point for return on investment. It's really not about pursuing true root cause, essentially. It's within the scope of our pursuit. Maybe I should mention that as well. It's within the scope of our pursuit. So we already have that debate for the Jon Snow case, right? I mean, if that action is considered containment or corrective action. So it depends on the scope of the pursuit, and it'll change. So it maybe one way to wrap it up is, instead of asking what we frequently hear, have you found the true root cause yet? Maybe we should ask, is this the right choice of the root cause? Instead of asking, have you find the real one? Things like that. Okay, so that's what I want to end up with for the first segment. And with that, let me look at the time. Maybe we can take the break, and then we continue with the remaining one. It'll be a little bit more techniques about the root cause analysis, right? So. Arvid, are you going to stop recording or pause?